Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first webinar of CISM Prep, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward, and I'll be your MC for this webinar and for the duration of the course, and your mentor is Jeremy Costa. Before we begin, as usual, some housekeeping. All webinars for this course will be held at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, with recordings made for those of you who cannot attend on a given occasion. Despite this, if you can make it, we hope you'll attend the live webinars and contribute to a collaborative learning environment with the forums and chat. We quite clearly use Zoom for our webinars and encourage questions and the use of chat during the lectures. We ask that you direct all questions relevant to course content to the Q&A section, and that you send all administration type questions, sort of dates and times and resource availability, questions about the nuts and bolts of the course, to the support team in chat. You can chat with panelists only or to all your fellow students as well, and you can make that choice by toggling through the drop-down box once you have opened the chat log. There are usually some very experienced industry-based attendees who can augment what Jeremy's going to be talking about and could be helpful with any queries you might have that are sort of outside the scope of what we're talking about. And I find that's especially helpful in relatively more technical courses like this one. We'll have Q&A sessions at the end of the webinars, or if a question is particularly relevant, I'll interject during Jeremy's discussion. For those of you who have never taken part in a short course with us, first of all, welcome. IT Masters is a training organisation that exists as a partner to CSU, or Charles Sturt University, who we work with to create and deliver a number of Masters courses. We also market these courses on their behalf and hope that the best way to do that is give some of it away free, like these short courses. If we do a good enough job, then students will hopefully be encouraged to enrol in the full Masters if it suits them. With that said, we want this course to be really useful and a rewarding exercise just in its own right. We want you to learn some interesting information, have some fun, and hopefully make connections with some of your fellow students. To date, very close to 4,000 people have enrolled in this short course, so you're spoiled for choice. You can chat away in the forums to your heart's content. Chantel and Hannah are around tonight in an administrative and technical support role for IT Masters. They're also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, or the Moodle page, or the course page, all used interchangeably, which is where you'll find the other materials needed for this course. Links to readings, discussion forums and quizzes, the exam at the end of the course, and the certificate once you pass the course. If you have any questions about the nuts and bolts of the course tonight or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details you can find on the course page. Next week, I'll talk briefly about Charles Sturt University and give you an idea of what studying with us is all about, and also how these short courses can help you in completing a postgraduate course. So if you have any questions about that sort of thing, just hold them over and I'll answer them next week. I'll let Jeremy tell you about his experience, but I think it's enough to say I'm pretty pumped to have you, Jeremy, running another short course with us. Can everyone please say good day in the chat to welcome Jeremy? And yeah, say have a nice time in the short course.
Thank you. Good day. Hope everyone can hear me. I'm looking forward to giving this this talk. It is a really important discipline to be able to help organizations navigate through being thrust into a digital world over the last however many decades that this has been kind of snowballing. Now, we obviously all work in organizations that have a digital footprint of some type. We handle information, we have our business processes in information systems, and our businesses rely on the IT systems to remain confidential and stable. So the information security, or the Certified Information Security Manager certification, is one of those certifications that focuses on how to decipher all this kind of digital risk or risk of being in cyberspace for an organization. So there's quite a good kind of approach to helping an organization, and it's a good way to help an organization to be profitable and help an organization to be successful. All right, so this is topic 1, information security governance. I'll dive into that in a little bit, but before I do that, I'll just give you an introduction to myself. Obviously, my name is Jeremy Costa. I've had 18 years in information security or cybersecurity, whichever way you want to call it. I don't mind either. I have worked in large telcos predominantly in my cybersecurity experience, in smaller organizations, and now working at another university, as well as doing some of this lecturing for Charles Sturt and IT Masters, which is a privilege to do and a lot of fun. I have a bunch of qualifications, which I won't go through, and certifications. I actually did my IT Masters, I did my master's degree through IT Masters and Charles Sturt University, so I am a product of this process. I enjoyed my online training so much during my my own course that I thought it would be good to assist and jumped at the opportunity to do some lecturing. I've actually been doing that for about 9 years already. When I graduated, I think about probably about 17 years ago, or 15 years ago. So that's kind of a wrap up of me. I have been a security manager in various roles, responsible for the security practice in about 3 large organizations, and worked my way up through that, through the information security practice otherwise. So I have lived and breathed this stuff for quite some time, and I hope I can impart some good knowledge and wisdom and help you get closer to actually passing the CISM and getting the knowledge to get that certification, put that on your CV, and help you actually get into the role. And maybe I can also guide you along the way in doing that role in an effective manner. All right, so the CISM is the ISACA Certified Information Security Manager. It's kind of the de facto standard for cybersecurity management in the industry. There are others around. IC Squared's got one. There are some competing ones, but this one has kind of been the earliest in this space and has maintained and persisted. I'm going to be really honest, and sometimes the content is a bit dry. So I'm kind of glad we're doing it in 4 weeks. I can really rip through it, but there is a lot of depth to it. So we will cover the principles and a lot of the concepts across the CISM, but there might be a need to do some further prep before you actually go sit the exam. And I'd recommend doing test exams to fill out that knowledge as well. We can talk about that later as well. There's 4 domains in the CISM. There's the information security governance, the oversight and pulling of strings within the organization about what goes where with security. There's information security risk management, which is about the risks associated with information security and how you can manage them, prioritize them, address them in an appropriate manner. And the real challenge, and find out the risk appetite of the organization. And then there's the information security program development and management. Whenever you have cybersecurity in an organization, which most organizations do have a cybersecurity issue or a problem or risks, I dare say there's not many organizations of a significant size that don't have a risk register kind of a framework running at the moment. But what you need to do in an organization is actually set a direction and try and get some purchase and some resolution to the risks that are present in the organization. And then finally is the information security incident management, which is my favorite topic. I think this is the area in which cybersecurity managers can really be, you know, the heroes in an organization. Sometimes they are considered police. So security managers, when you get a call from the information security manager or the CISO or the head of security, sometimes, you know, you're thinking, oh, what have I done now? Or what are they going to pull me up against? I think it's really a good time for information security manager to shine and to allow someone or a business unit to recover in a swift manner and actually help them. And it can be really, you know, I'd have to say that some of my, you know how you get those rewards and recognition things in organizations where someone kind of gives you you know, a lunch voucher or something like that as part of a monthly kind of award. Most of the awards that I got in that area are about incident management, where I've actually helped a business unit out of a sticky situation or reduce damage to their organization. So my recommendation is to focus on that as a way of changing the organization as well and helping the organization. All right, so with the CISM, the final thing I'll say about that is the content really is focused on decision makers and business goals. When you're in an organization and there's risks swirling around you and you need assistance and help, you need to be able to convince the people above you to provide you with the resources to do what you need to do to get the risk to an acceptable level. And the content in the CISM talks about that kind of a process, how to put the framework and structure and all the components around actually getting that and maturing the organization from a cybersecurity perspective. All right, so what does a cybersecurity manager look like, or an information security manager look like? I use these terms interchangeably. I know they have slightly different meanings to some people, but in our industry, if you're an information security manager or a cybersecurity manager, typically your role is very similar. There might be some sort of paper-based controls that you're responsible as an information security manager, but largely it's much the same. So don't get put off by the names. I've seen it as IT security, information assurance, but the security manager is the interface between the business and the security issues within the organization. And they come in a wide range of types and styles. What's interesting about cybersecurity, and I think is a good reason to be in the industry, is there's never a dull moment. There's always changes. There's always a new attack. There's always a new threat, plus all of the history of the old threats. So you're always challenged. You're always needing to upskill yourself, read as much as the next person, and be in the know and have a really good, I guess, stream of intelligence informing you about what's going to happen, right? So I think it's a really great industry to be a part of, and it's really great to be able to bring a technical knowledge of cybersecurity and a business knowledge within the organization together so that you can provide good solutions to assist the business and reduce cybersecurity risk. And that's kind of the crux of it. Challenges in doing this is it's difficult sometimes to make friends. Cybersecurity is not cheap. It can be expensive. If you're in the hole, as in you have a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of things to fix up in the organization, then you may put a lot of people offside. Now, the real challenge is to trying to keep those relationships okay. I think sometimes we go about cybersecurity and business in an unemotional manner. We say, well, you know, it's just decisions, it's just business, it's not personal. But I guarantee you that everyone's experience in an organization is that it's emotional decisions based on sometimes other than logic, all right, or other than business decisions. People still avoid difficult situations. People still avoid situations that make them feel uncomfortable. It's just human nature. So if you can help someone in a way that is not uncomfortable for them, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable because sometimes you're delivering bad news, but I mean, in just general assisting and consulting and coming alongside them as the business and making them feel like actually you're doing this together and you're helping, then you might actually get a lot more traction. And my experience is that is the case. Also, depends on the organization and the leadership, of course. So it's important to make friends. And this also helps you get executive support, right? Because if you have an executive who says, oh, we've got a security guy, he's really good, he knows where all the risks and stuff is, but no one really wants to deal with him. He keeps on escalating, he keeps on, you know, or she keeps on making trouble, and I keep on hearing these issues, but we've still got to keep them around because we need an information security manager. It's not the best place. You're going to have problems with executive support. And extend your influence is certainly going to be a difficult proposition. It's also, like I said, can be expensive, so you can have limited budgets, especially in this day and age, to actually spend time and money on information security. And the goal really is there is always a portion of cybersecurity or information security that is reactive. There is always going to be a part of it because you're reacting to threats as they occur, because some are unforeseen or some human error. But you want to move to proactive as much as possible. As far as you can get ahead of the risks, the more risks you are addressing that could hurt the organization in the future. And this is a kind of self-serving too. If you manage to get on top of the risks, then the cybersecurity manager's life is a bit easier. You get to go home on time. You don't have weekends of bleary-eyed. So it's a good thing to get through the risks. Okay, now this slide is just not part of the CISM, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what the cybersecurity practice looks like in an organization. Imagine up here above the diagram is the executive team, and around the whole of the outside is the rest of the organization. This box is the cybersecurity team, the cybersecurity practice. There is a requirement for governance. There is a requirement for management. Governance is going up. You are informing those above you in the executive team about what risks there are, and they can provide you with guidance and support as to which way they want to go. Hopefully you have some good options to say, right, we got this risk, but we can address it this way. The management is making sure these processes are working well, or these capabilities are working well. And typically you've got three sections. You have the warriors, the technical guys, girls, doing the security testing, the monitoring, the incident response, right? So the skill set is breaking into stuff and fixing stuff at a highly technical level. Then there's the critics, those who go via a checklist, those who are in compliance, doing project review, auditing, and compliance. And then the visionaries, those that are looking into the future going, this is the organization as it stands. We have a fairly inefficient way of doing security in our organization, and we have a number of risks that come because of that. Now, we're going to readjust and change things and set a strategy and a roadmap and an architecture to make sure that in the future, we are efficient and we solve future and address future and current risks. And these are the visionaries who talk about it and get it done. All right, so this is the doers. This is the management, making sure this works fine. Policies and risk management sit up here as well. Risks fall out of all of these different disciplines, and they are filtered up, and then we address them back down again. You could say that there may be another one over to the side, which is, you know, delivery of a program, but that's most likely in the visionaries. Okay. All right, so the CISM talks about information security governance as that high-level executive interface. I talked about providing resources. We said personnel management, risk management, configuration management, change management, access management, vulnerability management, incident management, business continuity management. All of these management processes have certain opportunities to address risk or identify risk. Whenever you make a change, whenever you, or configure something or change the access, you can do it in a secure way or not so secure way. You can either increase the security, keep it the same, or decrease security, depending on how you do it. So having oversight, information security governance in these key processes allows you to identify those risks that are occurring during the mechanics of the business operating. So getting on top of those processes is really important, because security is not just a technical issue, it is a business issue, right? So business always relies on the security of systems of information. Like I was saying at the start, is that you need your information in your organization to stay confidential, and the systems that handle it to stay stable and accessible. So it's not just that technology problem. If there is no understanding at the leadership level of what the risks are in the organization, they won't provide the right guidance. So it's important to get that information up. And obviously there is an ever changing landscape and threat scenario, right? So what I mean by that is we are constantly challenged by new threats, and the stories or the scenarios, and I'll go through these in the risk management live session next week, but the stories of risks that can occur and threat scenarios about an actor doing something negative with an organizational asset are always changing as well. And that impacts business assets. If you're looking at a risk in an organization that doesn't impact a business asset, then you're probably not looking in the right place. We need to find out where the assets are and protect those. And they're talking, in the CISM, they talk about the actual education of the executives being driven out of fear. So they read something in the paper, they see it for a partner organization, and then all of a sudden your manager comes to you and says, hey, information security manager, the CEO is asking about cybersecurity all of a sudden. How are we doing with that? So that sort of thing comes out where they get educated that way. You've got to take that opportunity to provide the right, good information to get to address the right risk. And also regulation is increasing the impact of cybersecurity breaches. We just have to look at the privacy legislation, how we have mandatory reporting now. That's quite significant. The possibility of fines, it's very significant indeed, and making people look up. And obviously, even if you do all this sort of risk assessment, you address the risk, you get a program, you get governance, you handle incidents really well, there is still an element of luck or bad luck. Some of the more secure organizations have had breaches even though everything's been in order. And you have to take that into consideration. Sometimes things are going to happen that are out of your control from a cybersecurity manager. What we need to do is to address those risks that we know about and find out about those risks as much as possible. So it can be an exhausting job to do that because it never ends. Yeah, and the CISM makes the point also that more needs to be done in the industry to make security a valid endeavor and a valued activity, right? To say it's valuable to the organization to have a check of security before we do such a thing, right? So they're delivering a product. How has made this impact us from a security perspective? So more needs to be done there. Okay, now this is a picture from the CISM manual that shows how the business vision flows down through the security kind of column, if you like, but it's a pyramid here. You have your business vision. So we want to be the best widget maker in Australia. That business strategy will be, well, we'll make sure we go to the best manufacturer, we do quality assurance, we'll work harder than everyone else, that kind of a strategy. And the objectives are, by the end of this year, we will get this many sales and double it by the year after. And with the IT strategy, we might say, well, if we're doubling that, we need twice as much capacity. So we need to double our infrastructure or go to the cloud. So you might have a strategy there. Then you might have the IT security strategy or the information security strategy sitting under there. Now that's all held up and flows down into the security policy, the security standards, the security processes, and security metrics, right? So they all flow down. And as you can see, there's feedback loops over here. And this is the way it generally works. Give or take a fair bit of messiness, but it does go in this direction. Now, the purpose of the security governance is really to align the security program with business objectives, okay? So when we have a successful information security governance, we will get good security governance objectives or security program objectives, a good strategy for delivering the security program and getting to the organization to a good place. We get policies, we get priorities on risks to address, we get standards and processes, so all the documentation that helps us to put all that process in place and all that framework in place. Then we get controls, maybe technical controls or administrative controls. We also get a program out of it that needs to be managed and delivered. And finally, we get metrics and reporting about cybersecurity, but also about how the program is being delivered. So out of this, the security governance, we get risk management, where we actually prioritize the risk, we communicate the risk, and we address the risk. We get process improvement. So the hope is that when you put security governance into an organization, we saw all those processes we had before, that you would actually get security embedded in those processes, right? So you get a better overall approach to doing things in the organization because you have those security checks in there at the right point, because retrofitting security is much more expensive than doing it at design or implementation. Doing it that time is a much better time to do it. Then you have event identification. So when a security event occurs, you get to triage that and say, is it an actual incident? Then you get incident response coming out of that. And then also with governance, you get improved compliance. These are all the hopes of the organization implementing security governance, that they'll get these things. You get good business continuity and disaster recovery planning. So when something goes wrong, you get a global pandemic happening, or bushfires or floods, then your business can continue to operate, maybe in a reduced state, but you can still make enough money as a business to not be too impacted. And that's the idea of reducing the impact of those events. Then you have metrics coming out of all of this, much like I was just talking about. And then you have the right resources through the organization looking at security. And then overall, it helps you to have improved IT governance as well. So those areas that you look at for security do bring to light maybe some bad practices in IT governance, and allow you to fix those and get visibility into those as well. So how do you get business alignment? Well, you don't talk to the hand. You've got to go and understand the mission of the organization. Understand the goals and objectives that the executives are talking about. Get to those executive meetings where they do a town hall, and you listen to what their hopes and dreams are for the organization, and write them down, and allow that language to enter into the information security strategy. Then you get the organization strategy and apply the cybersecurity strategy to that. It's also a big matter of culture. If you have a culture where no one talks about their failures, and no one talks about things that happen in their business for fear of being ridiculed, then that's not a great place for security. People make mistakes. If we are ridiculing people for clicking on that link, or losing that USB, or leaving that laptop on their roof, making simple mistakes that people do, then they'll end up not reporting it, and not reporting it is bad for security. Security thrives on information, just like it's protecting information, it thrives on information. That having the threat intelligence about what is going on is the only way you can react in a way that will reduce impact to the organization. So culture is really important from a security perspective. Having people being comfortable to report stuff, and having people be able to identify when a security incident is occurring is really important. We also want to understand what the asset values are. I talked about understanding the assets in the organization, and getting to know the organization and the avenues of business that actually make the organization money, to really understand what the executives are concerned about. And that's where we should be concerned as the information security manager. Now, this concept here, this risk tolerance or the risk appetite in the organization, is a bit of a mythical beast. I don't think I've ever seen it written down, but it works kind of like this. You have a risk register with all these different risks in there, and somewhere along the line, you start talking about all the risks you're going to address with a program. The executives then say, well, we only have enough money to address 5 of those 8 that you've just decided. And then you say, well, these 3 other risks are still going to be there. And they say, we're okay with that. We're just going to address the 5 at the top. That is the risk appetite. That is how you work it out. Now, it is different and can change between different executives, but you do need a decision there to decide what you're going to address and what you're not going to address. And for that matter, when you actually get that agreement about what is going to be addressed and what is going to be left, that places the decision in the business owner's or the executive's hand. Okay, so that's on their table. All right, and then you have legal obligations, obviously, and regulatory obligations, and actually market conditions that can alter how the business wants to operate and the goals of the business as well. So we have to be aware of those when thinking about the cybersecurity strategy and governance. Okay, so this is this slide is in here because ISACA and CISM like to talk about RACI charts. They're basically a spreadsheet or a table of responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed roles for a particular activity, right? So we have an activity here, request user account. The person responsible for doing that is the end user. Person responsible for making sure they do that is the end user manager. The consulted person might be the service desk, and maybe the end user manager say, right, this request is coming through. And the asset owner and the security team might be informed about it, so they can either veto it or be audited later on to say, did you know about this stuff? And you say yes, and all that sort of stuff, right? So the whole idea is to create a structure around who is to do what for particular activities and tasks, right? The point for CISM is that this can be mapped out for security responsibilities as well. And that security is everyone's responsibility in the organization because they all are trusted with some part of the organization's assets, whether it's access to systems or information, or actually, you know, driving strategy through the organization. It's important to remember that security is not just up to the information security manager or the information security team. We may be the experts in it and may set direction and advice, but actually carrying out a lot of this, we can't do it all because it's within the business where a lot of the decisions that impact security directly are at the front line. So for the exam, if you're going to go all the way with the CISM exam, look up on RACI charts. I have heard people call it RACI, but I think RACI is much better. All right, governance roles and responsibilities. We obviously have a board of directors and senior management, and if they have no oversight, then it is a liability. If they don't know what's happening, like I said before, about what's happening in the security space, then they're not going to set the right direction. Senior management is basically setting those objectives for strategy, for the security strategy, and also saying which functions land where in which teams, and what resources they have, and what infrastructure they'll get, right? So they're dishing out the resources to those who need them. The business process owners are wanting to deliver their part of the business so that they can be successful inside the business, so the business can be successful, right? So the sales guys are looking to be able to sell so that they can make money, make their commission, and help the organization go forward, right? If you have supported the business process owners, then you have success in the information security area, because often this is where some of the changes will come, and if you make it too hard for them, or if you be too difficult, then you lose their support and they'll just go bypass you and do things in an insecure manner. So it's a really important part. Then you have a steering committee, which is basically reviewing the strategy, making sure it's being delivered, pulling together the strings to make sure that integration is done properly between different departments and bits of infrastructure and applications. And then also understanding emerging risk and issues with compliance that the organization might be heading into. There's also the Chief Information Security Officer, the Head of Security, or the Information Security Manager, who has a responsibility for making those security decisions and ensuring action is taken, or taking action themselves, depending on the size of the security team. So within the security team, we have a requirement to have approval for the strategy and the roadmap before we can actually deliver it. Okay, so we need to be able to we can't just go off in our merry way and start delivering a strategy without the executive saying, yes, we want to do that, because it's their money that we'll be spending. We also want to measure compliance to the policies at some stage. This can be very difficult. A lot of policies and standards and procedures are aspirational. So you set a bar and everyone tries for the rest of their lives to get to that bar, you know, and you try and get there. If you're not auditing or reviewing or doing a security review to make sure you're getting there, then you won't progress. And then obviously you need to establish some communication channels around the organization to make sure that you have, you know, you give the right people the right progress reports about how the program is going. You know, if it's implementing as planned, you know, what the risks and threats are as a result of the cybersecurity program, and also the compliance levels that you're achieving with that program as well. Now, metrics are a bit of a mystery as well. So metrics can be difficult. I see there's kind of 3 levels of metrics. There's operational metrics, like, you know, how many emails are you blocking, and how many clicks there have been on malicious links, those sorts of things. That's an operational metric. You then might have one level up, which is a management level, to say, you know, the trending of security, you know, controls being hit, or the number of attacks is going in this way, or the effectiveness of the controls is going down, that kind of aggregate. And then you think about the executive level, where you start talking in levels of risk, where you say, well, the organizational risk is going in this direction because of this reason, we're addressing it to get it back down again, or it's dropped because the threats have dropped off. So it depends what the audience is and what they want to get from it. And I'll be completely honest and say, I've been doing dashboards for executives for probably a good 10 years in my various roles, and they have never been the same. There has never been one dashboard that I've got from, I don't know, an example from some other organization, say, hey, I've seen something like this before, or someone's doing this in this kind of partner organization, and it is never quite what they want. So there's a lot of tweaking, a lot of personalization, depending on a few things, right? So the executives may not be very clear, or may not have a very deep technical understanding. So they need it very much at basic level. And you don't kind of expect them to understand, you know, all the different attacks that's happening on your IPS device, so to speak. You know, why is it all remote procedure call this month rather than, you know, ICMP hitting the firewall? It's not what they're really after. They're after, they're not experts in cybersecurity. They're actually experts in running a business. So they want to understand how their risk is going for the business. So that's where the difficulty is. Everyone wants that answer to the question, though. How secure are we? How much security is enough? And it is rarely satisfied by any one dashboard. My experience is that dashboards will start with one thing, and you'll get increased questions and you know, requests to change them, and then move into something else. But to get metrics to be meaningful, to get metrics to be effective, they should be meaningful, accurate, automated, hopefully, repeatable, predictable, actionable, and genuine. Okay, so all of these things you just should be able to back them up. That's what it is. So if you get a report up to that level and they say, hey, this doesn't make sense, can you look into it and provide us an explanation? And you go and look into it and it's not what you thought it was, that is it undermines the trust. It's very important to be very critical and accurate at that level. Some of the standards to have a look at, 27004, COBIT 5. The Center for Information Security has a good set of metrics, and obviously special publication 855 as well. And I love the pictures of rulers there. All right, now the business model for information security out of the CISM is this. This is the sort of thing you'll want to learn for the exam, very much an academic thing. Obviously, organisations are much more complex than this, but it gives a good idea of how different activities impress on other parts of the organization, right? So you govern processes, the culture impacts people, human factors, impact technology. So it's a good way of thinking about it and put some structure around it. Now, the information security strategy. So actually, before we dive into this, guys, is there any burning questions in Q&A that we wanted to cover?
I don't know about burning, but we'll see how we go.
Okay.
Actually, there's a lot of chat. If you go back a slide or so, you were talking about, you mentioned COVID with your lovely rulers, and I'd forgotten about your excellent picture game from the last short course. There were some really good pictures, and I'm very excited about that. But there's a lot of people talking in chat about sort of saying this sounds like COVID or this sounds like ITIL. I wonder, how much of an overlap there is between all of the various sort of frameworks and certifications and all sorts of, ways people do things.
Yeah, so COVID is another one of, affiliates of ISACA as well, and, published by ISACA. So there is a fair bit of supporting of CISM with with COBIT 5 as well. Like there are some good things in COBIT about structuring IT. I think if you want to do it holistically, it's a massive pill to swallow, but it's got some good security processes in there and guidance on getting metrics. And I actually think the goals cascade out of COBIT 5's quite good as well. But yeah, they intersect. 27004 is obviously just about metrics, but obviously 27001 is good for a security management system that supports a lot of these principles as well, getting the security into the organization, getting a constant improvement process and things like that. So the way I kind of approach it is you borrow from what you need and implement what makes sense for your organization. And that's the difficult part. Trying to fit kind of a full COBIT implementation into a kind of a startup might not be what you need. It's more built for an enterprise, or doing, NIST equivalent, the cybersecurity framework, or the cybersecurity framework might be, too light for a massive organization, but it would probably fit in there as well. But yeah, so you've got to take what you can. There are overlaps and kind of intersects, but the CISM really is about the role of doing the security in an organization. All of the frameworks and advice and different standards outside of that you can draw on to actually help you do the cybersecurity management. So that's how I look at them, as all just different tools.
Right. So whichever one, sorry, you could use a particular one for a particular kind of organization. So I was wondering about scalability for CISM, and it just sort of depends where you are as to whether you'd use one framework or the other.
Yeah, I think the CISM works. CISM, I think, is targeted for a large organization, particularly because of the way it talks about how an enterprise fits together, and and the machinations of putting strategy together and all that sort of stuff, the different layers. But it does scale right down. I mean, all of these principles of addressing risk and risk acceptance and the accountability of risk to executives and their appetite of risk. Is all meaningful in those cases. And I think even if there's a small organization looking for an information security manager, they're looking to mature their security practice. So having someone who's got that bigger picture of an enterprise picture might actually help them mature where they want to go to. So I think it's helpful in most size organizations.
Awesome, thanks. We'll keep going. There's still a few questions, but we'll wait till the end.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So information security strategy, we're aligning with the business. So we've got governance with the executives and with the, trying to provide the right information. We now are sitting in our desk in our security team saying, hey, we've got a business around us. We are doing various things to make money and make the business successful. How does cybersecurity get alongside all of that and set a strategy so that we can be in a better place to achieve the business goals? Where are we now? What do we want to look like in the future? And what actions do we need to take, and in what order, to get to the desired security posture that would help the organization and get to that risk level that the executives want to get to? So we're really being pragmatic about the bigger picture of where we are in the organization. And that's a really important concept for the CISM, in that we did have a culture, and some places still do have a culture in the industry, where security kind of is the roadblock, or I've heard it called the brakes, right? And that's fair enough in some contexts. You know, if you're screaming down a hill, it's really good to have brakes. But if you're actually trying to go fast and do business really quickly, then brakes can seem like a bit of a drag as well. So we want to be able to be known as I guess the advocates for the business and the champions for the business, and getting to the desired risk level, not to just simply, for the sake of slowing a business down, slow it down. And sometimes it may be necessary to slow some processes down. Sometimes you may need a couple of extra checks, and we try and do that with as minimal impact to the business as possible. That's the idea of the information security strategy, and the big idea of the CISM, actually. Some of the pitfalls about security strategy is that you may be in your little security bubble and have overconfidence in your estimates, optimism in forecasts. You might get, you know, and this happens in meetings where you're presenting, you might get anchoring on a particular kind of factoid that someone just keeps on bringing up as, oh, I heard 2 years ago that this was the case. Or you might get, you know, people who are reluctant to change, people who make up kind of creative numbers as well. That happens. Also, in a presentation of strategy, sometimes you get people following a particular idea, and you know, you get people coming along that run as well. And then you also get false consensus, right? So you know, somebody says, oh, I reckon everyone in the room believes that this is this, and we should go in this direction. And actually it's only about 20%, but the rest stay quiet, and then it goes that way. So you don't want to have these pitfalls. You want to actually draw out in a presentation of strategy to get proper opinions. Even if they don't agree with your strategy, you can ask for an alternative or a different direction, but you've got to get to a place where you all agree. You've got to have you've got to have the executive group concur with your direction, or else they're never going to endorse it, and they're never going to be champions on it. So you've got to spend the time to get there. We're protecting organizational assets. It's as clear as that. Which assets, how much protection do we need? What are we protecting them against? Insiders, outsiders, criminals, nation states. How secure do we need to make the organization? It may seem obvious that we're talking about that with cybersecurity strategy, but it should be stated. What are we actually trying to achieve? And then you'll start asking those questions about the business. Well, what does the business do? How do we help them do their thing? Determine where the assets are is a good place to start. Understand their location, how much the business values them, who actually owns them, and has the right to classify them in terms of security. And then you can start to understand, right, well, these are the hotspots in the organization that we really need to protect. The desired state for our strategy is that posture that we're aiming for, you know, and it's at a point of time in the future, and often you don't get there perfectly, but it gives you that direction to head into. Some frameworks around that, we talked about COBIT 5, the process assessment model might be a good place to start to work out which processes you want to change in the organization. Also the capability maturity model, originally for developers, I believe, but it can be good. There's some security ones around as well. And also the security balance scorecard is good as well. And have a look into that for the exam for the CISM, which is a good way to gauge where you are at from a, a maturity level. So after we've got the strategy, we know where we want to go. We actually need a roadmap to understand the path to achieve those long-term goals. We try and break them down into short-term projects with the right order, right? So you don't go and build the systems without getting the infrastructure first, or the decide on the cloud location. And then you also want to have checkpoints and metrics along the way, so you can provide the details up to the executives about how you're going, and if you've hit roadblocks or you have delays and why that might have happened. You also might need to have process improvements and architecture improvements to actually stop backsliding. The idea here is that you may not just be putting new kit in. In fact, I would suggest when you get to an organization, you may be actually just remediating. So you may be putting in, stop gaps to stop the environment from degrading more and becoming more of a risk. Okay, so you may have a bank of WordPress sites that actually service most of your customers, and you come in and say, right, well, we need to create a new cloud infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. You spend 2 years building that, and the WordPress sites are left alone and get hacked, right? So we want some improvements to stop the backsliding. And obviously you can clean up, but you might just do that over time, and you do that a risk-based approach as well. So what resources do you get for a security strategy? You get policies. Policies define how people should behave in the organization and what level the security is. So like the baseline with the standards as well. And then you have the procedures, operating procedures that help you inject security activities within the procedures itself, and then guidelines as well. I remember early days, this is going to make me sound old, but having a guideline for the use of Web 2.0. So, how do you use Web 2.0 from a security perspective in one of my organizations that I work for? But yeah, they're helpful when new technologies come up, which is not 2.0 anymore. Controls, so IT controls within an organization can obviously assist in protecting the organization. Access controls, firewalls, network controls, controls, administrative controls, and countermeasures obviously towards to warding off threats. We also think of having layered defenses in cybersecurity, so it's you don't have. So there's no use putting, this is a good analogy for layered defenses, there's no use putting two firewalls back to back with the internet on one side of the two firewalls and the organization on the other side. There are reasons you might want to do that if you're an enterprise and you're getting DDoSed all the time, and you want coarse grain and then fine grain. But generally speaking, two firewalls actually serve the same function as one firewall. They are basically a packet filter to stop certain packets getting in or going out, depending on sessions and various other metrics and changes, right? So that I wouldn't consider as a layered defense. But if you had a web application firewall in front of a whole bank of web applications, and protecting all of that, you had another firewall that just worked on the ports. Well, that's a different logic. The logic is working in a different way. It's actually going to help you to have a layered approach. The firewall will block everything that's not 80 and 443 and look out for maybe malicious packets as well with an IPS module. And then the web application firewall will understand the logic of your application and tell or block things that are untoward and alert someone that don't fit in there. So that's more of a layered defense. So we want to have, and these are just protection mechanisms, obviously, but you want to have a layered defense in an organization. And when you're choosing new technologies to put in place, you want them to complement each other, not cancel out each other. So you don't want, if one can be broken through, that the other one naturally is broken through. if that makes sense. You want it to be able to fall back to the next layer. We have different types of controls. We have prevention, which is, firewalls are a good example of that. They actually prevent. Containment, maybe IPS is a good containment countermeasure. Detection and notification, we're thinking about SIEM, that will identify, which is security information and event monitoring, which will identify malicious activity if it's configured right and let you know about it. We have reactive controls, which may be turning off the internet. It's a reactive control, could be. Also evidence collection and tracking might be SIEM and forensics, and then recovery and restoration may be backup. So we have all these different defenses and controls to help us do what we need to do and help the organization stay safe. So what have we got in the organization? We've got the executive, CIO, COO, or CEO. Where should security sit? If you have a change in structure and you get reallocated, where should you go into? This is a good question in the discussion forum. Who should security report into? CIO, CTO, CNO, CMO, CEO, CFO, which C or no C? C maybe to the board. There's all sorts of places where security can report into. Should security be centralized or decentralized? How should the roles and responsibilities be designated through the security team or through the security organization? And where are the skills and education derived from, or where are those resources put into for the security team? And also, how does awareness and education happen for all staff? The organization needs to, as a whole, be made aware of security issues so that they can identify security incidents and report them. We also have audit and compliance issues I would say goals to achieve. Audits can be internal and external. Typically, audit findings don't go away. These days, I think it depends on the auditor, but often auditors just run by a checklist and look for accounts that have not been closed off and stuff like that, and won't look at the broader picture. They'll just have almost a sampling. It's important to get those resolved, but I would say resolve them holistically. So you're not only addressing the audit response, you're also addressing a risk in the organization. There's also compliance. You get good buy-in when there's fines on the horizon. Just a note there, you don't need to push that too hard. Obviously, there's a lot of voluntary compliance as well. Look at the privacy legislation. And then there is threat assessments as well, which can happen by a security firm and are, and often linked to policy development as well. If you find a new threat, then you might need a new line in your policy. The constraints we have in the strategy might be legal and regulatory. Okay, so we might want to do something that doesn't align with their requirements. We have to navigate through that. We might have a records retention requirement. Security likes to get rid of things as soon as possible because the more asset that hangs around, the more risk we have. The greater the asset, the greater the risk. Records retention like to keep everything forever, so we've got to find some sort of middle ground. Obviously, you might have some constraints around e-discovery if you're dealing with law enforcement all the time, handing you subpoenas and warrants or information disclosure requests. So consider those. You also might have constraints with, office space, data centers, also people, the time in which you might be able to achieve the strategy, and also the whole concept of risk. Who's accepting it? What tolerance is there for it? What perception is there of risk? And this is really important. Sometimes, if you're a Puritan, you would say, well, never, as a security manager, endorse a control that doesn't directly address a risk, right? Now, it's a black and white statement. If the control doesn't address a risk, I will not endorse it or push it. In fact, I might say, I don't agree with it and I don't think we should do it, even though it's considered a security control. I'm thinking of an example here, which I might talk about in the discussions. Okay, but the perception of executive or the perception of a regulatory body might be, unless you implement that control, you don't have security. You can do the threat scenarios, you can do a risk assessment and say, look, we went through all the scenarios and we believe it's a low risk and we're not going to address it. There'll still be a perception that you didn't put security in. And it may not be a correct perception, but it's a perception that needs to be managed. And you may have to put the control in just to manage perception rather than to address a risk. It's quite controversial, but I think that is a wise way to look at it. And obviously there's urgency at times as well when the business is under threat. Think of NotPetya or WannaCry. Then, you know, understanding you may have a constraint there because you need to pull out all your resources and actually address them quickly and do a whole bunch of patching. And hopefully there's not an SMBV3 one on the horizon. Okay, we made it. Oh, 3 minutes over. Okay.
Well done.
That was good. Then we've got the whole, yeah, we got the whole domain into just under an hour. There we go.
So these are points that you reckon people should be discussing in the forums?
Yeah, so we'll put the review discussion questions in each week into the forum so that people can have a good discussion around them, and they relate to what we've discussed in the live session. Yeah.
Maybe we just start start in this instance 5 threads, you know, and label them all this, and people can respond to them.
That'd be great.
And yeah, jump in the forums, folks, because that's where the real, like, apart from these webinars, that's where the really good stuff happens. It's, you know, so different for individual cases and so many it depends questions and answers. So
yeah, absolutely, that's where it is. Is there any questions, Guy, that I need to cover off from the live session?
Yeah, there is. Alrighty, let's start with Steve from earlier in the session. Was asking about what about compliance management in that list of different managements you had in one of the early slides. And some people were saying in the chat that actually that sort of falls under risk management. Oh, right. I was just wondering whether you have any sort of input or insights or opinions.
Yeah, depends on the compliance and depends on the organization. Obviously, it all kind of rolls up into risk management. You would have an enterprise risk register that your cybersecurity risk register or information security risk register would roll up into, depending on, you know, you might have a few line items in there about some of your bigger risks, but I would suggest that they are for different audiences. The compliance one may be definitely feature in an enterprise risk register, but it depends on the compliance you're talking about. Obviously, PCI DSS is a very technical compliance, so this information security gets heavily into that because we're often dealing with all the controls that are implemented. You know, other 27001, a bit more procedural and process, but obviously still very security related as well. So compliance management is, you know, as cybersecurity becomes more of a problem around the globe, we have GDPR and the policy, the privacy changes, and also the you know, HIPAA from the States and FISMA. You know, we have compliance coming from all over the place, and you just need to go to the kind of the AWS kind of compliance page and realize that there are so many different you know, compliance standards out there that it's bound to have an impact across the organization. Yeah. So yeah, compliance management is a big part of it. It can be a pain. It can be a lot of more work than what you would kind of pick off for just doing plain information security risk management sometimes. But it is a way for external organizations to determine if you're doing the right thing or not to a certain degree. I hope that answers the question.
Me too. Sounds good. On different sort of compliance and different frameworks and, you know, so many, I guess, moving parts. Marina's asked about different standards and policies in different countries, particularly given, you know, like IT is so global.
Yeah.
Are there particular regulations that are, sort of best practice in the world? And I would say, I would sort of add, does CISM change from one location to the next?
I don't think the actual guts of CISM change that much, but obviously the compliance requirements do change. And it's not so much the location you're in, it's more about the target audience. You can be an Australian organisation targeting European customers, and you now have to comply with GDPR. So yeah, the CISM mostly stays the same. It's all just a risk management process. The compliance is part of the risk management process, and identifying where your gaps are and resolving them to maintain compliance and keep yourself free of a breach ultimately is what will change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pete's asked a question about risk management and whether one matrix or the other is best to use. In his question, it's 5x4 or 6x6.
Yes, I love this question, Pete.
Does CISM endorse
man.
one particular kind?
Yeah, I endorse the most simple approach. I've been around the absolute kind of block with these things. What actually happens is when you present a risk matrix of any size, typically the leadership team will just say, let's deal with the top 3. So you may have spent all this time prioritizing and color coding and doing different shades of green to red and having different categories and all that sort of stuff, which is all really important, and assessing it correctly. And then they say, we'll just deal with the very highs, or something like that. So I try and say as simple as possible, but in actual fact, when you're in an enterprise, usually you have to fit in with the enterprise risk framework, and you'll usually adopt theirs, but really whatever works in your organization. And I'd have to say I've run fully fledged information security risk processes and frameworks on a 3x3. Truth be told.
There you go. That's what you should all do, folks. Absolutely, and in all circumstances.
That's right. Thanks for twisting my words there.
Daniel, I guess, has a slightly related question. Is there a framework to put a dollar cost on not doing security, or perhaps we could say on not doing security outside of those 3x3 or whatever it is?
Yeah. So there was a good, a fair bit of research on this. Like, has anyone heard of ROSI, the return on security investment? So have a Google of that, return on security investment. There's a couple of papers, academic papers, on if you can actually quantify your return on security investment on the breaches that didn't occur. I would generally say that's an academic exercise. You can try and put a number around it, but I think most organizations are just looking at trying to address their top risks, and it depends on how familiar they are with the risks and how hungry, like in terms of appetite, they are for that kind of risk. Then that will be their decision if they want to actually spend the money doing it. There is an element of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, if you actually address all the risk and you never have any incidents and everything's all good, then kind of the executive can say, hey, we never have any security issues. What do we need a security team for? And you also have this issue where if you're having a whole lot of incidents and you're having a lot of issues, they'll say, hey, our security team's not doing the right thing. Let's get a new one. So there's an important factor actually, being able to demonstrate your worth, right, and make security visible. And I think the best time to do this is through incident response. There have been a few times when we've put in a control measure and it's been very clear that it has protected us from an incident. We've got to be very noisy about those things, and make it very clear that actually protected us. Also, going through an incident response, running an incident response report to say, this is what happened, the timeline, these are the risks that have fallen out of it, the recommendations, will provide you with a much better support for getting those things done. At the end of the year, you can look at all the reports and say, hey, these are all the recommendations you signed up for, how are we doing with those? So yeah, I kind of meandered a bit there, but I hope that answered the question.
Meander is my favorite. That's good. I've started just dismissing the questions that have come in later because we're running over time.
Okay.
But thanks so much for everyone sending in. We'll probably just go with the 3 that I've got left. And I'll also mention that, as Marcelo says in the chat, or Marcello, I'm not sure which. Sorry. You know, it's really getting interesting now that we're getting to these discussion questions, and that's really important to remember. Like the forums are where like you can thrash out these questions as much as you want, and you can get so much from so many people in that forum. Really go for it, and we'll all be looking at it and making sure that it's all checked and made sure it's somewhere accurate, and so much of it's subjective. And that's all on the course page, as Max is asking. But we'll go with a few questions. Shazi is asking just about the CISM certification itself. Wondering about good resources for preparations, apart from, of course, this wonderful course that you're delivering. Are there any books in particular?
Yeah, sure. So I have to be really honest about the CISM review manual. It is obviously the key bit of it's the key book to go through to get the CISM, but it is also very hard to go through. There is another book that is, I think it's Cybex, the CISM from the Cybex one, which puts it in a bit of a nicer, hang on, I might just get it, a nicer approach to it. It's actually called the CISM Certified Information Security Manager it's the all-in-one exam guide, and I'd recommend that over the manual, not to erode any of the effort put into the manual. It's obviously the key document, but actually studying for the exam might be better with the all-in-one exam.
And there's so many links being chucked in the chat now. That's really cool. So
yeah,
you can all share them. Everyone, go nuts.
That's very helpful. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Abby, we've got 2 questions left. Abby has asked.
Wait a second, just to answer that. Was it Shazia? I would suggest the book. Obviously, going through the quizzes and all that in the books, but also there are some online exam prep quizzes that may cost $40 or $50, but I would highly recommend them. If you're actually studying for the CISM, you're actually looking to do lots of practice questions and have the book next to you to reference and look up. The way to study for these things is to find those knowledge gaps and then create a kind of a problem in your mind that you don't know that particular answer, then go find out the answer. And that's a much better way to make that memory or that knowledge stick. Sorry, end answer.
Awesome. No, good on you. Abby has asked, how is the role of an information security manager or cybersecurity manager or any other, designation changed by the advent of new technology like cloud computing services like AWS and Salesforce? Is it still as relevant? Is it changing?
It is changing. But I'll have to say the principles remain the same pretty much. You still have to kind of make friends and address risks and all of those things about access control and visibility. There's some running themes that go through the role of an information security manager that have been the same over the years that I've been an information security manager. But the technology that you're dealing with and the amount of third parties you're dealing with is definitely changing. So that it requires different questions to be asked. It requires, and the compliance kind of environment is changing as well. So that changes the questions and changes the approach. I would say in the next couple of years, it'll continue to change where security will become more and more important to organizations because it's only going one way. Organizations are putting more information in information technology, and they're putting more information in the cloud with the migration of assets into information systems. It only means we need more security because the asset is bigger. So it's just going to it's jobs for life, basically.
Well, that feeds very nicely into the final question for the evening, Jeremy, from Scott. what are some examples of entry-level jobs to aim
Yeah.
for as experience, on the path of becoming an information security manager, cybersecurity manager, these sorts of things? Because so many of the people I talk to out of these short courses are like, well, I'm looking at changing careers. I'm looking at, my job's being automated or whatever. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's a conundrum actually. I've been hiring staff for probably about a decade into cybersecurity roles, and probably for the first 7 years, I didn't hire anyone with less than 3 years experience in information security. So while it's a job starved for candidates, and there are lots of jobs in cybersecurity, it's actually quite difficult to break into. And it sounds like a bit of a conundrum. Well, there's all these roles going, but you kind of need experience to get the job. So that makes it difficult. A couple of ways to kind of get around that is to go for a kind of a more junior role, which is sometimes palatable, sometimes not. There is possibly the opportunity of doing some security in your own organization. So if you're in a tech role, or if you're in an area that is not related to security, getting a transfer or going for a job inside an organization is often very handy for an information security manager, because they don't just get someone who's interested in cybersecurity and enthusiastic, but they get someone with business knowledge, and they can furnish the cybersecurity knowledge on top of that. If you get someone from outside the organization with no business knowledge of the organization and no information security knowledge, it's a fairly steep learning curve for quite a while before you're super effective. So it's not as palatable. So I think if you're looking to break into the industry, don't look at always going for a new organization or a new role in an organization. Look at seeing if you can kind of go diagonal in your own organization. That's a good way of doing it. Or getting into an organization where there's information security as part of the role, but it's just a matter of getting that experience. Doing the CISM is terrific as well. Getting the certifications under your belt will show that you're interested, because often people do those outside of the work they're doing, especially when they're trying to break into the industry. So getting a couple of letters that can be in your CV, and it will come up in CV searches for agents and things like that, will help you out as well. But I think essentially the experience is probably more important than the certifications mostly, but the certifications do help.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, I guess that's it for tonight. We could keep going all night, no doubt, but chuck it all in the forums. Next week,
I'll opt out of going all night this time.
Good choice. Next week we'll be talking about risk management and compliance. I guess all that's left to do is thank Hannah and Chantel for hanging around and looking after the chat and the course page, and thank everyone who's hung around for an extra 20 minutes listening to the discussion. And thank you so much for attending live if you've done it, or for listening along to the recordings later on. And Jeremy, thank you so much for running another short course. It's really, it's been fun tonight, and I'm sure it'll be fun for the next few weeks as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Guy. That's great.
Alrighty, well, good night. I'll let you throw us off, and off we go into the ether.
Yes. Okay. So see you all next week. As Guy said, into risk management. This is kind of the engine room of the CISM, where all the decisions are made and how you kind of steer the organization. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.